Hi, and welcome back to Plan9Crunch. I'm Joe Gibson, and every week here in Plan9Crunch, we do a reads out of some genre novel or something related to the genre. Today, we'll be reading from Dracula's Guest by Bram Stoker. It is a cut first chapter of Dracula. It's ambiguous as to how it was supposed to fit in originally, if it's a different draft or whatever. And I don't have a physical book. It is on the public domain. I have a PDF to read off for you. Beginning at the beginning. When we started for our drive, the sun was shining brightly on Munich, and the air was full of the joyousness of early summer. Just as we were about to depart, Herr Delbruck, the maitre d'hotel of the Quartier Saisons, where I was staying, came down bareheaded to the carriage, and after wishing me a pleasant drive, said to the coachman, still holding his hand on the handle of the carriage door, "Remember you are back by nightfall. The sky looks bright, but there is a shiver in the north wind that says there may be a sudden storm, but I am sure you'll not be late." Here he smiled and added, "For you know what night it is." Johann answered an emphatic, "Ja, mein Herr," and touching his hat, drove off quickly. When we had cleared the town, I said, after signaling him to stop, "Tell me, Johann, what is tonight?" He crossed himself, as he answered laconically, "Walpurgis Nacht." Then he took out his watch, a great old-fashioned German silver thing as big as a turnip, and looked at it with his eyebrows gathered together and a little impatient shrug of his shoulders. I realized that this was his way of respectfully protesting against the unnecessary delay, and sank back into the carriage, merely motioning him to proceed. He started off rapidly, as if to make up for lost time. Every now and then, the horses seemed to throw up their heads and sniff the air suspiciously. On such occasions, I often looked round in alarm. The road was pretty bleak, for we were traversing a sort of high, wind-swept plateau. As we drove, I saw a road that looked but little used, and which seemed to dip through a little winding valley. It looked so inviting that even at the risk of offending him, I called Johann to stop, and when he had pulled up, I told him I would like to drive down that road. He made all sorts of excuses and frequently crossed himself as he spoke. This somewhat piqued my curiosity, so I asked him various questions. He answered fencingly, and repeatedly looked at his watch in protest. Finally, I said, "Well, Johann, I want to go down this road. I shall not ask you to come unless you like, but tell me why you did not like to go, that is all I ask." For answer he seemed to throw himself off the box, so quickly did he reach the ground. Then he stretched out his hands appealingly to me and implored me not to go. There was just enough of English mixed with the German for me to understand the drift of his talk. He seemed always just about to tell me something, the very idea of which evidently frightened him. But each time he pulled himself up, saying, "Walpurgis Nacht." I tried to argue with him, but it was difficult to argue with a man when I did not know his language. The advantage certainly rested with him, for although he began to speak in English, of a very crude and broken kind, he always got excited and broke into his native tongue, and every time he did so, he looked at his watch. Then the horses became restless and sniffed the air. At this he grew very pale, and looking around them in a frightened way, he suddenly jumped forward, took them by the bridles, and led them on some 20 feet. I followed and asked why he had done this. For an answer, he crossed himself, pointed to the spot we had left, and drew his carriage in the direction of the other road, indicating a cross, and said first in German, then in English, "Buried him what killed themselves." And we will leave it off for there right now. This is a very interesting short story, and we haven't even gotten into the action of it. But first, you can see in the classic Bram Stoker Dracula thing, he's building the tension. It's even a similar scene, I guess, to Harker's early ones, though this cannot be Harker because it doesn't seem to be journal entries. It seems to just be a first-person narrator who might have been a cold open kill, and then you transition to Harker. It's hard to say. It was excised from the original Dracula manuscript at some point, published as a short story through Dracula's Guest and other weird stories by Bram Stoker. A lot of scholars have looked a lot of different ways into this critically. Critics have noted that there seems to be some inspiration taken from Gottfried Berger for the poem Lenore, and the opening of the story is similar to the introduction of Sabine Baring-Gould's book, with heavy inspiration, though there's also some in Dracula, but different heavy inspiration in regard to Sheridine Le Fanu's Carmilla, which we may read eventually. We very much enjoy Dracula and the story that came out, but it's also interesting to look at the story that is not part of the larger manuscripts. And so that's what we've done today. We may do it eventually again. Thank you for watching, and that's a wrap.